Welcome back. The recent removal of Senator Ali Ndume as Chief Whip of the Nigerian Senate has sparked intense debate. The debate is not just about what happened to the Senate Chief Whip, but it is also about the independence of the legislature in Nigeria. The move, which was orchestrated by the ruling All Progressives Congress, the APC, Ndume's party, and it was executed, of course, by the Senate leadership, has been widely condemned as an attack on the democratic principles and freedom of expression in Nigeria. Well, Senator Ndume's vocal stance, his vocal criticism, Senator Ndume's vocal criticism of the government's handling of the economy and the food scarcity apparently led to his downfall, raising concern about the availability, or ability rather, of lawmakers to hold the executive accountable without fear of retribution. Well, as we discuss the implications of this development, we must ask, is the Nigerian legislature truly independent, or has it become an appendage of the executive branch? What are the consequences of this trend for democratic governance in Nigeria, for accountability in Nigeria? Amadi is the director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. He joins us virtually from Nigeria's federal capital. Peter Ameh is the National Secretary of the CUPP, also joining us from Nigeria's capital city, Abuja. Gentlemen, good evening to you, and thanks for joining us. Let's start with you, Chief Peter Ameh. Does the removal of Senator Ndume signify, the erosion of the independence of the Nigerian legislature, as far as you're concerned?
Yes, it's obvious from what we've seen. If you look at what happened with Ali Abdullahi Ningi, when he made a statement at the floor of the chamber talking about budget padding, and it was summarily suspended. The Section 4 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, where we derive the power, where the power was derived to create the National Assembly, bicameral legislative chamber, the House of Rep and the Senate, where they have the power, the authority to make good laws for order and peace and good governance of our country. It entails that there must be separation of powers, and this separation of power helps to reduce the authoritarian nature of those executive and government, or those who eventually control the judiciary. And what is happening right now is an anathema to the development of our democratic practice. If we continue in this light with the summary shutdown of senators are equal before the law. Just like first among equals, that's what the Senate president has become. But if you now look at that freedom of speech as enshrined in Section 39 of the Federal Republic of Nigeria Constitution, 1999, as amended, that people can no longer talk, people can no longer express themselves, and that freedom of speech is guaranteed, but freedom after making that speech is no longer guaranteed, and that the level of interference by the executive in the National Assembly affairs is unbecoming, and it will further weaken the fabric of our democratic development, because you can't have a National Assembly that approves everything 100% and does not allow freedom of expression within its own members at the floor of the House, like what was done to Ireti Kingebe, what was done to Natasha today. You can't go with this suppressive system. We're not in an authoritarian regime. We're not in a democratic system of governance that is governed by laws and regulations. And if these laws and regulations are undermined by whoever that person has been elected to represent our people at the floor of the Senate, it calls to question, it calls to attention, and we must not allow what they are trying to do to marry the National Assembly legislative chamber with the executive arm and make them look as if they are supposed to be operating on the same bed. This is not good for the development of our democratic culture. It will not help to properly separate the
okay, interesting. Peter, very interesting. Yeah. So how do you think this development impacts the ability of the lawmakers, especially at the federal level, to hold the executive accountable?
It becomes difficult. They infringe of their fundamental right to expression. They can't express themselves. They can't discuss, and say things in the way it should be in the parliament. They are treated as school children. They don't allow them. When you want to speak and you find out that you are going in a way that the Senate president does not want, that he has to report back to the president to get permission and take decisions. He ambushes you and stop you from speaking. It is clearly that it will affect lawmaking process. It will affect the transparent of presentation of bills and passing of budget. It has affected it. We have even seen where they bring approval for loan and it is passed within 24 hours without due diligence, without proper investigation, without looking at the legal framework of what kind of loan we are taking, or checking whether this loan affects the interest of the Nigerian sovereignty. So these facts are already there. A suppressive regime, whether in the National Assembly, whether in the executive, and whether in the judiciary, a suppressive regime is not, it does not benefit anybody. In fact, it affects the interest of the citizens for their right to be protected. Because if you have a regime where the three arms that were created to function, in a way that there's a check and balance, that they're able to look at the other one not exceeding its boundary, and now the boundaries have been exceeded by the executive, and then the National Assembly has been restrictive in the approach to be able to put the necessary check and balance that is there, so that the executive will know what it's doing. What has Ndume said that is wrong? He talked about the freedom of the Kakisto Christie and
he called his colleagues kleptomaniacs, and he said that all of them are thieves. Well, hold the thought, Peter Obey. I want to bring in your counterpart on the program, Sam Amadi. I almost said Commissioner Sam Amadi because I'm used to calling you that for some years. Yeah, welcome, sir. Good to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you join us. Where did things begin to get? Where did Nigeria have that turn? In the relationship between the executive and the legislature, because some time ago, I think when Nigeria returned to democracy in '99, we had a bit of friction. The National Assembly leadership were able to hold the presidency into account. I remember what happened between Speaker Gali Umar Naba and Olusegun Obasanjo. The two didn't see eye to eye, but the man stood his ground. So where did things turn this way?
Well, good question. I think there's been a history of perversion. First, under three theories, when I was special advisor to the Senate president, we talk about interdependency. The first theory or the first practice was subordination. We saw that with Obasanjo and Wabara. Initially, when they were removed, he subordinated the National Assembly to the executive. Then we saw a second brand, called the second school, which is the second way, which is where intransigency, the National Assembly is actually fighting, very opposed to the executive. That is the second school of thought. Now, that is exemplified by, if you like, Chupo Kadibo, Labadem, and so on. Then the third was Kendamani, which is under the third way, which is interdependence, where you try to bring together both, try to help the National Assembly provides support in terms of legislative program to the executive. Interdependency, each of them recognize that they have roles to play in the constitution and manage the national economy. The executive provides the executive action to drive economic growth. The legislature provides the legislative framework to guide that action. I did a book called The Third Way, Interdependence, which is what Kendamani modeled. Now, after Kendamani, of course, he got David Mark, who came also with strong leadership when President Jonathan was going through a crisis, helped stabilize it, and became very influential in that government. They had smooth working, somewhat not as independent as the Kendamani era. Then Saraki came, fell out with Buhari, and now you have a situation where there is some kind of opposition back to the Chupo Kadibo style. Now, after Saraki, we had Lawa, who came also with much more subordinated approach to executive-legislative relationship. And now, ultimately, we have the Mabio, who has kind of accelerated on that learning curve of subordination. So you can see from this history that each era has been defined by two major factors. One has been the personality of the guy who comes to leadership. Two, the process of his emergence. When Mwabara was removed under Obasanjo because of the banana peel, Nnamani was put in there by his colleagues who felt it was now time for them to exercise their own choice. So they called him our own choice. And Nnamani was very clear-minded that it was the power resided with his colleagues, not with the executive. In fact, the PDP then, National Chairman Amadi Ali, did not support him. The PDP was against him. They wanted the Kuremado, which was who Governor Chimaroke Nnamani and Obasanjo agreed upon. Kuremado was a lower, younger senator, but came in as secretary of government to Chimaroke, was one of the people they thought who would be loyal. In fact, I recall when in a meeting with Chairman Ali, he said, Kenaman, he said, you are a rebel, you're not our choice. So the Senate and the House of Reps made a choice for their own person, including Mazare, who was the then speaker. And that's why third term failed. It failed because these guys could present an independent, statesman-like, interjection and resistance to that influence and movement. So one factor is the person. Who are you? What vision of parliament do you have? The second factor is very important, is how he came to power. So here you now see Ababu, who seems like somebody who is more keen about transactions. And secondly, came in with Tinubu's blessing, and the legislators were corralled and all agreed. So you're going to have a much more subordinated National Assembly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Senate.
Thank you very much. Interesting. Peter Ameh, having listened to what somebody has said, it is clear that the leadership of the Senate and House of Representatives, as the case may be, is very critical to the independence of the legislature in Nigeria. Now, looking at the collabo between Bola Tinubu presidency, the executive branch, and the Senate, the legislature is led by a second-time Senate president who, by legislative tradition, may not even be considered a ranking senator because he's been there only once before he became minister. I don't know if I'm correct, but what do you think lies ahead if the current trend continues? Peter?
I think if we continue with the subservient nature, can you hear me?
Yes, please. Yes, please go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
If you continue with the subservient nature of what Akpabio is doing at the National Assembly today, it will further weaken the fabric of the independence of the National Assembly. I agree with Professor Amadi when he talk about how the person got there, but I do not also agree when you talk about the character, the capacity, the attitude of the person. That doesn't matter. If there's a proper procedure for electoral processes in Nigeria where credible people will be elected, it is because of the fraudulent nature of our elections. That's why you find out one party over-dominate the National Assembly, and in the process, they are more doing whatever they are doing to weaken that system. Authoritarianism has no place in the democratic system, and the way it was created is that one branch does not dominate another. And for what we have today, if we allow Akpabio to continue with the subservient nature and the suppression of dissent at the floor of the Red Chamber, we will have ourselves to blame, because we must be able to speak up and put the Senate on a check, so that they will know that it's a Senate for the people. It's not Senate to continue to act on the interest of the executive. Yes, you will be able to protect the interest of the executive when it comes that what they present is for the interest of the people. And then you look at it, but there must be proper dissecting of these issues before you can now pass it. But what it is today, you see Okweyemi Bamidele, who is now the flogger of all the senators in the House. When you raise up issues, he comes up with a motion for suspension. We must be able to get this right, that this is not a suppressive chamber, it is a democratic chamber, people elected by their constituents to represent them at the Senate, to present matters that will be of interest to their people, and act in a way that the interest of the people is protected. If people don't have freedom of speech, then there's no democracy.
All right, interesting. Somebody, the legislature is only called the People's House. Peter Ameh has talked about the fact that these are the closest to the people. These are the representatives of the people. How can we strengthen the legislature in Nigeria at a federal level and even at the state level to be truly representative of the people, to be truly independent, and to perform its role of serving as a check and balance on the executive and the judiciary?
Well, I think, look, very simple. You must say what makes the representative actually representative is the fact that the people elect them. So if you don't have a credible electoral system that guarantees that the people can remove their mandate from you when you're not serving their interests, then you can have this big idea around people's house representation. By the way, the House of Reps has a booklet. Its manifesto is called The People's House, but we can argue whether they are truly the People's House. So the key point here is the legislators have little incentive to listen to their people, but have more incentive to listen to the president. And I give an example. There was a Labour Party is supposed to be the newest wave of populists, if you like, the party that's close to the people, because most people who got in there didn't get in there because they're strong, didn't get in there because they are popular, but got there largely because of the Obi effect. So they were Labour, obedience and other Labour activists got them in. But how many of them really are responding to public concern in their representation? Why are they not? Because as soon as they get there, they begin to fancy procedures that can help them through INEC, through the presidency. They begin to think around money. There's so much pork barrel. Look at our budget. There's no credibility or stability or kind of certainty around the budget. The budget is a tool of political patronage. And so being in the Senate or House of Reps is seen more as entry point towards belonging to the capturing class. So the democracy ought to be that these guys will quake when the people are angry. Right. These guys will look in the face of the president or the speaker or the Senate president and tell him, go to hell. But they can't do that because they have fashioned their political trajectory outside the people because the electoral system does not guarantee. So I agree that it's supposed to be the people's house, but until you get credible electoral system that says what happened today, this man can go and challenge it, and the people will say the Senate president will get you out of that house. Look at the US, for example. Look at many of the people that...
Yes, somebody, because of time, I will have to interject you at that. Sure. I want to give Peter a sentence or two just on how the people can get their house back. Just a sentence or two.
Yeah, the people must organize themselves and believe that government truly belongs to them. The people are not beholden to government. Government is beholden to the people. And the more we allow them to continue to play a state capture scenario, that they have already taken control of the state and that there's nothing we can do about it, the more we get into this logjam of failure of leadership. But we must be able to now prove to them that in every election cycle, we don't even have to wait the election cycle because one of the fundamental foundation of democratic practices is when people agitate, when people protest peacefully for requests that are needed to be able to uplift democratic governance.
All right.
That we have.
Okay.
People must know that democracy belongs to them.
Interesting. Amadi, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. Peter Ameh, National Secretary of CUPP, former National President of IPAC. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you. It's almost been a lecture, tonight. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend. And of course, the People's House must truly be representative of the people. That's what Nigerians are calling for. My name is Kofi Bartels. I hope you had a pleasure and a thrill watching the program tonight. We'll return tomorrow with more on Politics HQ. Good night.